Hello, I'm Tom Hardwidge. I'm one of the founders of Tool Story Games, and we are currently producing a point-and-click adventure game called Lucy Dreaming, and that is on Kickstarter right now. And there's a demo that you can download. So go and check that out. But obviously, listen to the rest of this first.
In a nutshell, what kind of game are we talking about?
So Lucy Dreaming is a classic point-and-click adventure game. It's a bit like the 90s LucasArts games that you used to play, like Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle, but it's very much with a British sense of humour. And we've also got some added kind of modern perks in there as well. So we've got a hotspot display, so you can kind of find hidden objects in a room a bit easier, and also things like a instant travel between scenes. If you double click on a doorway, you can kind of instantly travel from one scene to the next. So we're kind of taking all the kind of stuff that you loved about the old classic adventure games, and kind of putting some kind of modern technologies in there as well.
What inspired you to make Lucy Dreaming?
When I was, how old was I? When I was about 11 years old, a friend of mine had a copy of Monkey Island on his Amiga 500 machine, and I absolutely just fell in love with it. It was a few years before I ended up with a computer myself, which would actually had the capabilities to run Monkey Island. So I then, as soon as we got this computer in our home, I kind of ran out and bought myself a copy of Monkey Island, and surprisingly remembered quite a lot of the puzzles that I'd seen my friend playing 2 or 3 years beforehand. Absolutely loved it. And then Monkey Island 2 kind of came out sort of a year or two later. Loved that, and just since then have just been completely in love with point-and-click adventure games. I've also played other games like Zelda and things like that, but I'm not much of a gamer myself. And when point-and-click adventures kind of fell out of fashion with the kind of the main gaming industry, I assumed that there weren't any more games like that for me. No one was producing them. Therefore, I could go and I could download Scum VM, and I could play a couple of the old classic games again, play them through if I wanted to. But if I wanted something new, there wasn't going to be anything there. It was kind of many years later, so we're talking sort of a couple of years. I don't know how long ago. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I found a point-and-click adventure game called Festa Mud, I think it was called, on my. Is in the Apple App Store. So I played that on my phone. It was amazing. It was like pixel art. It just felt exactly like a LucasArts game, and I was amazed that somebody had been able to produce this. And they only ever made one episode, and they never kind of continued it. So I had this kind of love rekindled for it again. And then a couple of years ago, so as in my day job, I'm a designer, and I do marketing for clients. And a couple of years ago, one of our clients came to us and said, "Look, we've produced a video, and we'd like to have a game to go along with it to kind of help support it and promote it." And I immediately kind of put my hand up and said, "I would love to make an old pixel art, LucasArts style point-and-click adventure game. Can we do that?" And the client was similar age to me and said, "Yeah, go on then, let's do that. That'll be fun." So we did, and we made it. It was for the Roman Baths, who are a museum and an ancient kind of Roman heritage site in the UK. And it's a story about a guy visiting the Roman Baths, and he has his cloak stolen. So we built this game. I at this point I had no idea that game engines even existed. I didn't know that. So I built it in Dreamweaver, using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, coding it all from scratch. My own kind of game engine to work in a browser, because that was the only way I thought it would be possible to do it. So we did that, and we produced this game. I think it took about 3 months from start to finish. produce it, writing it all and doing all the artwork and kind of coding this HTML game engine, I suppose. So that was a couple of years ago. After that, the first lockdown hit last year, and I decided that I had a bit of free time on my hands, and I would use this same HTML game engine that I'd produced to make a game for myself, really. So I created another game, it's called Lockdown, and that's all about kind of the first UK lockdown, kind of running out of toilet roll and that sort of thing. And I kind of launched that in, when was it? April last year, and it got really well received on Twitter and things like that. And it coincided when I posted it on Twitter. It coincided with a game jam, an adventure game jam finishing, and a Twitch streamer got in touch with me and said, "Oh, was this game part of the game jam?" And I went, "No, I don't even know what a game jam is. What are you talking about?" And they kind of introduced me to the whole indie dev community, which at that point I had no idea even existed. This really opened my eyes, and I suddenly saw that there were people making the kind of games that I loved and assumed I'd never see again. And it's as a community, it's just one of the most welcoming and supportive and brilliant and creative communities that I've ever been a part of, and it's been incredible. So on the kind of basis of that, the lockdown game was really well received. Everyone seemed to be enjoying it, and I thought, well, I could have a look at maybe doing this properly. I had a look at the other adventure game jam games that had been produced around the same time. I go, oh wow, what engine did you use for this, or how did you do this? And a load of the other developers were giving me advice and offering their expertise and chatting about it. And I ended up sort of coming up with an idea for another adventure game, which is Lucy Dreaming, and that's kind of where I got to, and that's sort of where the kind of the what inspired me to actually start making the game.
You actually made a game about the lockdown.
Yeah, so I mean, some people have just flat out refused to play it. They just say, I'm in a lockdown. Why would I want to play a game about being in a lockdown while I'm in a lockdown? Whereas a lot of other people just love the idea. It's a humorous game. It's not intended to be depressing, or it's all about. It's a kind of the main protagonist is a single mum in a sort of regular suburban house in the UK. She's got 2 children to look after. She's homeschooling them, so she's trying to balance that. She's a virologist, a scientist herself, and she's trying to figure out how to combat COVID. So you've got kind of that sort of side of things, and then you've got the general trying to run it, trying to run the house, trying to, they've run out of toilet roll. So how do they, creating a puzzle about trying to recreate a toilet roll when you don't have any, and what do you use, and trying to feed the children and everything. So it was what's been quite interesting is that it's also, from my point of view, it's served as a bit of a reminder. It's a bit of a record of exactly what we went through, because even now we're kind of coming out of a lockdown in the UK at the moment, but looking back on the kind of the panic and the sort of bizarre feeling that everyone had when the first one hit this time last year it's hard to remember now, because we've got so kind of used to wearing masks and not having socially distancing and not having and spraying everything with hand sanitizer and sprays and everything, that actually now that seems normal, and going going back and seeing this kind of record of like, this is how bizarre it felt at the time. It was so weird, and the whole country and economy just didn't know how to cope, and it was so weird. So I quite like the fact that there's a bit of a record of that, so I can kind of show my son in 10 years time, say, remember lockdown, here you go, you can play a game.
In the game, if you had like run out of toilet paper, did you have the option to just go over for a shower every time you went to the toilet?
To be fair, the toilet puzzle isn't the only puzzle in the whole game. So it was no, you just have to wipe your bum with a sock, basically. Yeah, it's sorry, I shouldn't give away spoilers, but I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. There's a few that you have to, there's like a puzzle where you have to do baking, but there's no, because you have to feed one of your children, he wants some biscuits, so you have to make some biscuits, but because all the shops have run out of all the ingredients that you need, you have to find kind of different ingredients around the house that'll do the job that you need it to do. So there's that. There's all the time throughout the game, you also have to take pictures of everything that you're doing to post on social media to pretend that you're doing great, and actually it's all fine. So you take pictures that your children have done, or anything like that, just to make it look like you're doing better.
Pictures of your bare feet because you don't have socks anymore.
That doesn't come up. No, the sock, because I mean, she's got small children, so the socks are just lying about all over the place anyway. So that's fine. There's plenty of spare socks. But it's Oh, and the other thing we did is when we launched it, we kind of put a PayPal link on there for people to donate, and 50% of anything that any people donated went to a women's charity in the UK as well, called Women's Aid, to kind of support what they were doing during lockdown as well. So that was really nice. It didn't make, it never kind of went viral, never got and never kind of sort of got a huge amount of traffic to it. But we raised a fair bit for charity as well, so that felt good.
Yeah, it's nice that you went for charity indeed. So to go back to lucid dreaming, because we are not talking about the lockdown game, we are talking about lucid dreaming.
Yeah, sorry.
What makes lucid dreaming different from other games?
The story is kind of different, and the setting. So there are a few different games out there, adventure games and other genres, which kind of focus on dreams. But I found a lot of them really seem to focus on just the kind of abstract and disjointed nature of a dreamlike experience. They try to kind of emulate that, and sort of you go into a scene and it's very bizarre and misty and out of focus and that sort of thing. And I wanted this to be more kind of down to earth, just kind of just a bit funny. So the dreams that are going to be in the full game and the characters are going to be weird, they're going to be bizarre, because dreams are, but there's also going to be a certain amount of normality. So you might have a dream that is set somewhere very familiar, but something's wrong or something's a bit weird, and what that does is it allows me to create puzzles which work between dreams and reality. So you go into your dream and you might be able to access a memory, or be presented with something that a repressed memory that you'd forgotten, and you go, oh, hang on a minute, right, I'd completely forgotten about that. And that then allows you to then, when you return to the real world, you can say, well, I remember that now, and I can now apply that, and I can now talk to a character in a different way, or it might have unlocked a code or a piece of music or a bit of information that you can then use in the real world to kind of move the game along and to unlock new areas and new scenes of the game. And equally, you can do the same kind of the other way around as well. So if you've got some information that you've got whilst walking around in the real world, when you go back to your dream, you can apply that same information. There's also, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a mechanic in the full game where you are able to influence your dreams. So what kind of dream scene you're going to be entering, and that's where the kind of the idea of the lucid dreaming and the dream control kind of comes into it. But not only that, you're also able to bring along a kind of dream companion in the same way. So you're able to kind of say, actually, there are kind of multiple characters there that you can bring along and see what they do in different dream situations. So what does this character do when they're in this dream? It might be completely different to how they manifest or act in a different dream. So there's lots of different ways that and different kind of options and things for the way that the game can kind of play out. So and I suppose in one of the other things that's made the sort of the game different from a lot of other games in the genre. So it uses what's called a kind of a Scum interface, where you've got a set of verbs somewhere on the screen. So look, pick up, use, talk to, that sort of thing. And traditionally, when the first kind of Scum games, so Maniac Mansion, which is what Scum is named after, came out, they had a lot of verbs. So that rather than kind of having just a generic kind of click or something that would interact with something, you could interact with things in huge number of ways. So push, pull, open, close, and, loads of different ways of interacting with things. And they've gradually got sort of stripped down when the newer versions of Monkey Island were released in the early 90s. And then a lot of them kind of stuck. So new ways of using, of navigating point and click games were developed, things like verb coins or one-click interfaces. And obviously we have, there are text parsers and things for the Sierra games. But in terms of the Scum interface, that sort of set of verbs that was then used in multiple LucasArts games after Monkey Island tended to kind of hang around. And I think a lot of developers look at that as the kind of holy grail. That's like that's what Ron Gilbert did, and that's how it has to be done. Those verbs must be there for a reason. And I kind of what I really wanted is I wanted to create a game which had a Scum interface, because I feel that for the nostalgic feel and the love of those games that I wanted to recreate, it was integral. I was always very much a Monkey Island 1 and Monkey Island 2 fan. I love Monkey Island. I love Curse of Monkey Island, Monkey Island 3, in its own right, but it's got a very different feel to it, and the verb coin interface on it, for me, doesn't have that same nostalgic feel of the kind of the first LucasArts games that I played. So I really wanted to keep that in the game, but I have streamlined it. So there are only, at any one time, there are only 4 verbs. There are look at, pick up, use, and talk to. You could, in theory, you could strip it back even further if you wanted to and have a one-click interface. I could have added more verbs into there, and at one point I did have more verbs, but I've then quickly realized that actually a lot of the things that I was repeating a lot of work. So a lot of the verbs that I had in there, I was using the same responses for multiple verbs. And actually that's when I kind of went, you know what, I don't need give anymore. That can be use. So I can do, rather than saying give hammer to child, you can do use hammer with child. Actually thinking about that example, that's not a great, because using a hammer on a child is very different to giving a hammer to a child. But in theory, if you're looking for a way to give an object to someone, the use verb works quite well. So I've streamlined that. And what's nice is that when people have played the demo, no one has even really commented on that. No one's kind of noticed. No one said, hang on, where are all my verbs gone? Why can't I push, pull? Why can't I open and close? Why can't I do these things? They just go, use. And they look for the verb that is most closely fits what they want to do. And if all the people playing it are having a kind of a smooth gameplay experience, then as far as I'm concerned, then I've done my job properly. The UI needs to be completely ignorable. It's not. It needs to be something that isn't part of the game itself. As far as I'm concerned, I want people to be able to just play the game, play the puzzles, play the narrative, and not worry too much about what the actual UI.
I just want to use a hammer on a child right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a really bad example, and I'm very sorry for anyone if that's a trigger for anyone using hammers with children. That was not my intention. I've never used a hammer on my child myself. That you can't use a hammer on a child in the game. It was on the spur of the moment, and I apologize.
Well, I'm glad that you can't hammer children in the game. What is the Scum interface?
So the Scum is it's oh, hang on now, what does it stand for? You know what? I'm gonna have to Google that. I know what the last two letters stand for.
I had never heard of it. That's why I asked.
So it was originally it stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion, and essentially it was originally developed, but for Maniac Mansion by Ron Gilbert and the team at LucasArts, and it's the interface that you see on the early LucasArts games where you've got verbs down in one corner, not necessarily in a corner, but you have a set of verbs, and then you have objects in the scene and characters, and you have items in your inventory, and it's the way that those all kind of come together to essentially build up a sentence. So you would say, let's say give this time, give hammer to child. That's still very dangerous, but it's better than using a hammer on a child. So what it does is before that interface was developed, when you had text adventure games and you had what are called text parsers, so you'd literally the player would have to type in the whole sentence, the whole command. They'd have to say give hammer to child and kind of hit return and hope that was understood by the game engine. With this, you were given those kind of building blocks to build up the command in your own way. So you say, right, this is what I want, the action I want to perform, this is the item I want to use, and this is the object or the character that I want to use it with. So you immediately saw the visual representation of all the options that you had in front of you, and you couldn't kind of you eliminated that sort of that problem of making mistakes. So if you mistyped something, or if the text parser didn't understand, if you said stamp on floor, it might say I don't understand that, because you're supposed to say step on floor or tread on floor, or what so because there's so many different ways of saying the same thing, and especially if English isn't your first language, as we discussed earlier, there are so many different ways of saying the same thing that a lot of the time you're there trying to figure out exactly what it is that the game engine wants you to do. Whereas with the Scum interface, you limit that down. It's a much more visual way of interacting with the environment, and that's my understanding of what the Scum interface is. So it's SCUMM. So script. What was it? Script. Hang on. Script creation utility for Maniac Mansion. There you go. Thank you, Google.
Yeah, Google is amazing. It tells you everything.
Google's not always right, but in this case, that was very handy.
For how long have you been working on this project?
For Lucid Dreaming, it's almost exactly a month now. So we launched the lockdown game in March, April time, just a week or so, or even just a few days before the first UK lockdown was kind of eased. I really wanted to get it out there before so while the lockdown was still in place, and then we started looking at concepts for other games, and the concept for Lucid Dreaming, and that was in about beginning of May last year. And we're at the end of April now, so yeah, about 12 months. The absolute longest part of the process for the whole thing has been the kind of building up of the community for the Kickstarter launch. So quite early on in the process, I was talking to other indie devs, and the idea of using Kickstarter to fund the project seemed like a really good option. So I looked into it. I downloaded an audio book by a guy called Jamie Stegmaier, which is all about crowdfunding. And he basically said, just stop what you're doing. Don't launch on Kickstarter. Just stop, take a breath. What you need to do first is you need to build a community of people online all around you who you can essentially get excited about the project. You can tell them about it, you can get them to tell their friends, you can get, gradually build up the numbers so that when you launch on Kickstarter, you're not starting cold. You're not suddenly going, oh God, I've launched on Kickstarter and now I've got to quickly find people who want to back it. And that's what I've kind of spent the last 12 months doing, really, is just sharing my development process. I write a blog, and I've put my entire kind of journey from knowing absolutely nothing about indie game dev at all to what game engine I want to use, what my approach to writing is, what my approach to puzzle design is, what I've got right, what I've got wrong, more what I've got wrong, how the whole project's evolved, and that sort of thing. And that's kind of putting that out there in kind of updates for people as really engaged the wider community. I've made some amazing friends in the indie dev community as well. And it's been a fantastic process, but it's been quite long. By comparison, the actual dev and artwork and creation of the game has been a fraction of the amount of time it's taken to kind of just prepare for Kickstarter.
Yeah, Kickstarter is indeed a very, very long process, and even then, nothing is guaranteed.
No, absolutely not. And I'm hoping that what I've learned and what I've done this time around, if this is successful and we make Lucid Dreaming and it goes well, and then I've got loads of ideas for other point and click games that I want to make, that then when we get to that stage, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot simpler because we've already got that community there. We've already got a fan base, and you've got people who've engaged with the project before, and we will have proven that we can deliver as well. So I'm hoping that in another couple of years' time, I don't have to go through the same process starting from scratch again.
Yeah, that would be nice. You don't want to
It would.
to do everything all over again. You just want to make the next game, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to concentrate on making a game and not have to worry too much about marketing as much.
You need a publisher.
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I love. Although it's been hard work, I love doing it myself. I'm really proud of where we've got to and what we've managed to do from literally from nothing. From the budget that we've put into creating the demo and doing everything kind of, because I'm doing the whole lot myself. The budget is an absolute shoestring. It's practically nothing. We've had to kind of pay for the engine, the game engine license, and a bit of music and a bit of like various kind of Kickstarter fees and various things like that. But apart from that, it's been very, very little. So I like having that level of control, and I don't know how well I'd do if I had other people kind of involved, sort of trying to influence it as well. I don't know. It'd probably be all right, but I don't know. Not this time. Maybe next time.
If you have the skills to do it on your own, it's probably best to do it on your own.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper to do it on your own as well.
Yeah, because you don't cost yourself money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just my own time. So my own time and my own sanity is what I'm paying.
Yeah, well, that's the risk you're taking. What game engine are you using, and why are you using this engine?
So As I said, the first games that I produced, I did in HTML, and I had to kind of plan out how that was going to work. How was I going to recreate the Scum interface? How was I going to make the characters and the objects and the items interactive? Work on the inventory. I created a save game system and everything like all of that was kind of included in my original HTML engine that I built. So when I started looking at game engines, the first one I looked at was Adventure Game Studio. And that, to be honest, I played about with that, and I had to go with the tutorials, and I managed to get a little way into sort of creating a game, and thought, okay, that's good, but I'll try another one and see what else is out there. And I found Visionaire Studio, which is the game engine that I'm now using, and it's developed by a company in Germany. And the interface for me was much slicker, and the way that the games are kind of structured in there are the way it's very similar to how I'd structured it in my original kind of code that I created. So I instantly understood how everything connected. So I go, well, this bit over here is the same as my bit of code over here, and this bit over here, well, it's got a different name, but it's basically the same as this bit. And so I instantly knew where different bits had to plug in and kind of how that works, and it felt very intuitive for me. It's not the cheapest engine out there. Obviously, Adventure Game Studio and Unity are free to a point. And Visionaire Studio, there's the indie license is about, I think it's about €59 or something like that. So obviously, it's not the cheapest one out there, but I've enjoyed using it. It's really slick. It's really kind of nice to use, and it's been a good fun using that to create the game.
You are going on Kickstarter with Lucy Dreaming, like you already mentioned. Why did you decide to use Kickstarter?
To be honest, I looked at other. When I started getting involved in the indie game community, there were already a few games on there from other indie developers that I met and started following on Twitter, and they were saying, hey, we're on Kickstarter, and it just kind of seemed like what everyone else was doing. I also was aware that although I can produce a relatively short demo or kind of a couple of hours of gameplay pretty cheaply, actually, if I want to produce a full game, I'm going to need sort of proper voiceover cast. I'm going to need proper music in there. I'm going to need if I'm recording any voiceovers myself, I'm going to need recording equipment. If I want to release it on say on iOS, I'm going to need a Mac. I use a PC at the moment, but I'll need a Mac to run Xcode to be able to compile the app. There's various things I'm kind of going to need up front in order to be able to produce the project, let alone kind of covering my own development kind of costs and time. That putting that to one side, there are a lot of things that need to kind of be paid for. So rather than kind of producing something in a kind of lower quality or a half-assed way, I wanted to be able to do it properly and try and front load the cash. So having the investment up front, being able to produce something, and then in terms of unit sales on Steam later down the line, it's taken the pressure off that. I'm not there looking for a huge return on investment when the game releases, because I've already funded the development of it. And at the end of the day, it's our first project, so it's a bit of a vanity project. It's a bit of a showcase piece. I want it to be as good as it can be and show off what we can do. And it's a huge learning curve for me. It's doing something that I've not done before. I'm learning all along the way. So I have no experience of how much to even charge for it on Steam, what kind of sales to expect, what sort of I have no idea of being able to project that as a business model. So the way I saw it is, if I can fund it up front, I can look at that amount of funding and say that is enough for me to make the game, and anything after that point is great, but it's not. I'm not depending on post-production sales in order to be able to kind of survive.
You should join the PlayingIndies Discord server. There are a lot of developers in there that have released games on Steam.
Which Discord server?
PlayingIndies Discord server.
You're in. Yes, absolutely. I think I am on your Discord server now, but I need to. Yeah, I joined your server and then stupidly launched a Kickstarter campaign, so I haven't had any time to do anything like actually chatting to people about nice stuff like that. So I'll absolutely get more involved in that.
I just gave you the developer role, so now you can see all the rooms that are attached to developers.
That's brilliant. I am now officially a developer. There you go.
Yeah, that's
it.
You have been trying all this time, but now you just finally became.
That's all I needed. Do I get a certificate?
No, you just get the orange name.
That's it.
Yeah. So now you're officially a developer and you can access the developer rooms.
Brilliant. Thank you. I shall have a look at that later on.
But there's a lot of people in there that have already released games, so they could give some free tips about the release and pricing and all that kind of stuff.
Brilliant. Well, I've got a bit. I'm guessing I've got an idea of. I've got a bit of a plan that based on other similar games that I've kind of looked at on Steam. So hopefully I'm not too far off the mark. I think about £100 for a game is about right. I think. Yeah, no. So no, I've had a look at the sort of similar things. So I'm hoping I'm kind of pitching it right. But I've got to fund first. Got to get through Kickstarter first.
Yep, that too. What are your expectations from the Kickstarter?
I don't have any expectations at the moment. I've done my research. I've done the best that I can in terms of building community. I've read blogs. I've read books. I've listened to experts, and I've taken on board everything that they've told me to kind of give me hopefully the best chance of funding. We managed to fund 50% of the full total in just 11 hours. So the first initial launch has been fantastic. Obviously, it's slowed down a bit since then, but it's still growing. It's still gradually increasing. Every time I refresh it, there's a little bit more in the pot. So I am hopeful, but I'm also very aware I don't want to get overexcited. I don't want to assume anything. I would rather assume that it's not going to fund and then be delighted than get overconfident and then be gutted when it doesn't.
For the viewers, there's a link to the Kickstarter in the description below.
Oh, jolly good.
There will be. Did you encounter any setbacks during the project, and what did you learn from them?
Yes. The first, luckily, the kind of only major setback that we've had occurred quite early on, but it was quite a fundamental one, and that was the name of the game. So initially, I thought that I had checked on Google and checked, everywhere for the name of the game we wanted to call it. We originally wanted to call it Lucid Adventure. And as far as in my head, I had researched this, and a game of that name did not exist. So I decided to call it that. We created a Twitter feed, we created a website, we've got a website, lucidadventure.com. Everything was going great. And then I think after the website had launched a couple of weeks later, I thought, you know what, I'll do a search on Google and just see if anyone's mentioned it, or maybe it might be any news articles or something like that. And all that came up was somebody else's game, which had exactly the same name. And I don't know how I missed it. I don't know what I was thinking and why I thought I don't. I have no idea. But I'm a bad researcher. That's my problem. I don't know. I don't know how it happened. So essentially, it was a bit of a panic, and say, right, okay, how am I going to get by this? So I chatted to some of the other indie developers and game industry professionals that I'd befriended on Twitter in the meantime, and said, right, let's brainstorm. Can we think of new ideas for names? And eventually, the one that stuck was lucid dreaming, and we like that because it has a sort of a play on words. It sounds like lucid dreaming when you say it out loud, and that's the, actually it works quite well with presenting the kind of the hero, the protagonist, Lucy, as well. So she was already called Lucy, so that fitted really nicely as well. So even when the game was called Lucid, I had it in my mind that the main character was called Lucy. So everything that I promoted with the character design and everything said Lucy on it. So that worked really well. We bought new domain names. We set up a new website, set up a new Twitter feed. Everything kind of transferred everything over, and it was fine. And although it was a bit of a panic for me, actually nobody else really cared. So as far as I can say, that was probably the main sort of setback for me. And luckily we caught it early, because I wouldn't want to get to the stage I'm at now and then have to do it.
It's actually really funny, because yesterday I had an interview and that guy had the exact same problem. He had announced this game with a name and everything, and the next day Sony announces a game with the same name.
Yeah, nothing's original. Everything's derivative.
Yeah, but in his case it was Sony too, so it was not like he could do anything about it.
Oh yeah, no, okay, yeah. No, at least yeah. I mean, I don't know who the publishing company was for the other one, but it was a well established. The Lucid Adventure looks really good actually. It's not a point and click, luckily, but it's a very it's obviously got sort of quite high production values on it, so it's better avoided.
But you're not the only one with a name problem.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm sure it happens all the time, frankly.
Yeah, well, with more than 30 games coming out every single day, at some point you will run out of names and games will just become numbers.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you will buy game number 1,003,000 something.
That's it. It's just a unique sort of generated number, and that's the name of your game.
Yep, because the names are all out. If you can advise a new or young indie game developer, what will you tell them?
The most amazing thing for me, and the most influential thing for me, was getting involved with the indie dev community on Twitter, on Facebook, in Discord. I mean, for me, I don't know what other genres are like, but for adventure games, the indie dev community there, and the adventure game fans as well themselves, the players and the streamers and the YouTubers, they're just the nicest people you could ever meet. They are incredibly creative, they are supportive, they are if you can get involved with the community, it provides everything you need to get started. You get experience from people who've created games before, whether that's chatting about Kickstarter or how to get set up on Steam or coding or artwork or anything like that. There's so much experience to be had there. There are potential opportunities there as well. There are game jams that everyone's sort of running throughout the year that are run by different organizations, and there's little competitions that indie devs get involved in, which then leads to collaboration. So if you specialize in something specifically like dev or artwork or sound design, you can find other people who share your same passion but will complement your work, and you can build up great teams of indie kind of game developers. And say developers, not everyone's a developer, but people involved in the indie game creation business, work together. You get kind of constructive criticism when you don't think you need it. Someone's like, what, actually you could do a change in that, because you're going to annoy a lot of people, or this doesn't quite work. But it's always done, in my experience, it's always done in a supportive, constructive way, rather than just a critical way, which you quite often get if you're part of a community of consumers. So if you're putting out your game and you sort of put it on Steam or you put it on the Google Play Store and you say, hey, what do you think of this? The customers will tell you what they think, and they won't hold any punches. If they don't like it, they will give you a 0-star review and they will slate it. When you talk in the kind of the indie dev community, there's no one will shoot you down. No, they'll say, right, in my experience, this is a good idea or that's a bad idea. But really, everyone is aware that everyone has to forge their own path and everyone has their own specific goals for their project anyway. So you can't always apply the same logic. You can't just say that's rubbish. You have to say, you have to give a reasoned argument, really, I suppose. But the kind of constructive criticism is brilliant, and that is also leads into kind of the support and the keeping people going when people are saying, God, this project's really grinding me down, I'm really struggling with this, kind of geeing people up and saying, come on, you can do it, you've got this, just keep going, and this looks brilliant, I love this, sharing it, liking it, retweeting it, getting out there. It's a brilliant thing to be a part of.
What do you think about the current marketing strategies in the indie game industry?
It's so different for everyone. So some people come to this with a bit of a background in creative industries, or they'll come to indie dev with marketing. So like myself, with kind of marketing and advertising experience, where this sort of thing it's kind of what I do for a living. So I'm although the nuances of the game industry are completely new to me, and like I said, I don't know what a business strategy for Steam is going to look like, but I do know how to talk to different target audiences. I know how to sort of say to different people, right, this is, test different messages out, look at the data, see what works, and kind of be analytical about it. Some people are coming to this from a completely different angle, where they have zero experience of that sort of thing, and actually they just want to make games. I just want to program something, or I just want to draw pixel art, or I just want to make music, or whatever it is, and they're not interested in the marketing, and it's really quite daunting. It's like a rabbit in the headlights thing. It surprised me actually because I've got indie developers now who were kind of seasoned indie developers when I first started entering this community a year ago, who I was sort of looking up to and saying, God, they're producing these amazing things, and they're now coming to me and saying, how do I do this, or what should I tweet, when should I release this? Because everyone's got different skills, and they're and that's what's so nice again about is this kind of collaboration. So, well, if I can help someone say, actually, you know what, I wouldn't say that, put it, phrase it this way, and you'll find that you'll engage more people, and that sort of thing. So in terms of marketing strategies, every game is different, every genre is different, and every person brings different things to it. And the landscape's constantly moving, and it's constantly changing. So what worked 2 or 3 years ago may not work now, because a particular type of game or a particular genre or a particular platform might become suddenly in fashion, and suddenly the thing of the moment, and then it has a huge kind of boom, and then a couple of years later the same strategy and using the same kind of methods won't work, because consumers are bored of it, and everyone's we've seen it's done before, and you have to move on to the next thing, and so there are kind of transient trends like that. And what's quite nice about, I suppose, with the adventure game community, because a lot of it's kind of very nostalgic, it's creating games that remind people what it was like to play adventure games when they were younger as well. I mean, obviously there's a lot of modern and sophisticated titles out there as well, but where the kind of the sort of niche community that I'm mainly a part of is this sort of nostalgic, retro kind of feel games. And because it's already old, it's already out of fashion, it's kind of relatively stable in that respect. So it's, you know, you'll see kind of peaks and troughs in it, but generally speaking, there are the people who like to play those games will always love playing those games, and it's not a kind of a flash in the pan, like, oh quick, there's a new, you know, it's the new VR, or it's the new Candy Crush, or it's the new whatever it is, you know, it's a sort of existing kind of trend, I suppose, or genre.
Where do you see the indie game market going in a few years?
I like I say, I'm still new, very new to this whole game. So I'm not a market analyst, but I certainly hope that it continues to be financially viable. I hope that all the indie developers that are out there are able to sustain themselves with it. If it's, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a full-time occupation, whatever it is, I hope that the support from fans and players, and other developers as well, I mean, that continues to kind of make it sustainable, so that these games can be produced, the creativity can still flow, and it, you know, the money is still there. I believe it will be. I think if there are people, there are always going to be people who want to create games, and there are always going to be people who want to play games. So as long as those two people can kind of find each other, then hopefully it's going to continue. There are also, I mean, we've seen so many indie games kind of getting really high profile publicity in the games press, and I think the games press is definitely beginning to take a lot more notice of some of the stuff that's coming out of indie games, because people are discovering them, and I think their readers are there saying, these amazing games are out there, and you know, it's all well and good kind of covering the latest, you know, cyberpunk title, but actually what we want to do is you know, we want to talk about these other games that we're playing, and I think the journalists and games press and things out there are, you know, they have to be in touch with that, otherwise they are going, you know, they're going to lose touch with their readers, and that's it's been great seeing a load of indie games being featured alongside some of the kind of AAA titles. It's fantastic. So I hope that continues.
Did you do any game development education in school, or did you learn the whole development process on your own?
In terms of game development, I did that. That's all been on my own. That's all been kind of my own sort of hobby on the side. I did study animation at university. I hated it because I have zero patience, and having to draw the same thing over and over again, just I got so bored with it. Why I thought that animation was a good idea, I have no idea. But that's kind of what I studied at university. But during that time, I was doing kind of web-based projects, interactive projects, and Flash was a really big thing at the time. So I made quite a few small puzzle games and little kind of explorative games and things like in Flash. And that's where I kind of started in terms of game development. Then when I moved into the advertising industry, that kind of thing was still relevant. So I was able to, I did a lot of online advertising, so like banner ads that appear on websites. And you know, one of the first projects I remember working on back in 2003 was for Hewlett Packard. And what we had to do was we had a Flash banner ad, and the file size limit on it, I think, was 18K kilobytes, I think. And I had to create and program a 3-dimensional Rubik's Cube into the banner itself, which could be interacted, so it could be randomized, it could be interacted with and solved, and all be within this kind of 18K file size limit. But it also had the logo in there, it had text in there, it had all the marketing messages and things in there as well. So by the time we kind of got that, it was trying to get it down to file in the right file size was really tricky. So I along the way I've done game development in some forms, but in terms of adventure games, I've got no formal training at all. And this is my, I only started a couple of years ago, so this is new territory for me. But I can program a small kind of puzzle or number game or something like that quite happily. So I have experience with coding. Obviously, you know, after studying animation, I do have some experience with animation and with kind of drawing, and I'm a designer by trade. So in terms of using kind of digital tools and Photoshop and the software for designing, that's fine as well. So I've got a lot of transferable skills from what I've done, which I think is what's allowed me to kind of hit the ground running a bit with the game dev. Is I've got skills that I can draw upon that I've developed in other industries.
You hated animation, but you did choose it. Did you have like different expectations before going into it?
With animation, I feel I was missold the the course by the university that I went to. I won't name and shame them, but I felt like the course, when I went to go to the university and sort of see what it was presented to me in a certain way, and when I actually signed up to it and got on the course, it was very different. It was handled very differently, and it wasn't a good experience. About halfway through the degree, I actually changed my degree, and I changed it from animation. So I did animation for the first year and a half, and then I changed it to a multimedia degree. And so I was able to, because I was doing all my animation I was doing was all digital. It was in Flash and Lightwave. Anyway, so I was able to transfer that to the multimedia degree. At that point, I was then programming websites, programming interactive stuff in Flash, and I was a lot happier. So I was able to kind of save it a little bit, and actually, you know, at that point, I actually managed to scrape through and actually passed. If I'd stayed doing the animation side of things, I almost definitely would have failed. It didn't engage me at all. I loved watching cartoons. I loved drawing and making things, even like 3D models. I love making models, but I like making them or drawing them once, and that's fine. So I'm quite happy with character design, but when it comes to animation, by the time I've drawn something 2 or 3 times, I've just lost interest. It's not so bad with pixel art, because there's very limited sort of, well, you can probably get away with being a little bit lazier sometimes with the animation, and that's something I need to work on. But that's why I kind of like the low resolution old school pixel art, because it helps me to get away with doing a bit less animation, which I absolutely hate.
Wouldn't animation be like a lot easier now that computers have evolved, or would it still be having to paint everything over and over and over?
It's still, to be honest, it does. It's yeah. I mean, it depends on your process. So if you look at a game like a point-and-click game, like Theropods, for example, the artists there are literally drawing, you know, all the frames of animation from scratch, and then kind of translating those into pixel art later on. So there's an animator there, and there's a pixel artist there as well, and they kind of work together on that. So at some point, you can obviously do animation with something like Spline. Spline, can't remember. Where you're able to kind of build models and have them interact in a certain way, and you know, you sort of, if you lift their arm up, it's all connected at the elbow and the shoulder, and kind of does a lot of that side of things for you. So your proportions are always there. But in order for animation to look authentic, someone has got to put the attention in. They've got to kind of move the character in the right way and make it look natural. So it's that sort of, it's that kind of that sort of attention to detail that in the animation side of things that I just don't have the patience for. I may even at some point look at trying to sort of collaborate with an animator who does this sort of thing properly, to try and improve, or maybe kind of tweak my stuff, because it's the artwork I think I can do, but the animation side of things, you know what? It's just that it just doesn't interest me as much. I think that's the thing. I think that's probably the one thing with the whole kind of game creation is that's the one thing that kind of, if I get to a point where I go, I've got to animate another walk slide because I've got a new character and they walk in a slightly different way. I've got to animate that, and I just go, oh, really? And I said, all right, okay. So I have to, and I can do it, but I think it sometimes shows that my passion sort of lies elsewhere.
Yeah, I would probably get really bored too if I have to draw the same character like 20 times. After the third time, I would be like, man, this character can go away. Time for a new one.
Yeah, and you'll look. Sometimes I find that like my drawing will drift slightly, so I'll look back. I'll be on kind of frame 5 or 6, and then I'll look back at the first frame again. And I think you kind of always cycle it through, and you're always playing it through. But it'll suddenly flip back, and you go, hang on, somewhere along the line, their arm has stretched to like half as big again, or their nose has got bigger, or something sort of as they've turned around, it's just not look right. And it's I find I like to work quickly, and animation requires a lot more kind of patience than I have sometimes.
I can imagine. So we are at the final question now. What is your favorite video game of all time and why? That's
quite an easy one. My favorite video game is Monkey Island 2: The Curse of LeChuck. I'd say probably, despite the fact that the game itself is just awesome, I think it hit me at exactly the right age when it was released. So I enjoyed playing Monkey Island 1, but when Monkey Island 2 came out, I suppose because like I said earlier, with Monkey Island 1, I'd already seen my friend play it. So I already knew about the insult sword fighting. I already knew how some of the puzzles worked. When Monkey Island 2 came out, I had no idea about any of the puzzles, and I had to discover the whole thing and the whole world of the different islands and everything for myself. And I got totally absorbed in it. And listening to the music now it still gives me goosebumps. I just absolutely love that game. I love Monkey Island 1 as well. I love Day of the Tentacle. They're kind of my top 3, but Monkey Island 2 for me, it just I was the right age. It was perfect for me, and I love it.
Yeah, that game released in the year that I was born, so that's why I
What?
played it.
Oh, go on, Bennett.
Yeah, I had to look it up, and it was released in 1991. I was about 7 months old when it released. So.
Oh wow, okay.
I wasn't old enough to play it.
No, well, it was. I didn't get it I didn't get it as soon as it released, because in the UK it came out a little bit later. I certainly wasn't able to afford it when it first came out anyway. So I think I was about 13. I think it was 1993 when I first got my hands on it. But it was, but I didn't know anything about it at that stage, so there weren't any spoilers, and I just loved it.
Well, the games we love are good, right? The first game I really played was Pokemon Red, so that's way later.
Wow! Oh, blimey! Yeah. The first game that I ever played was called Valhalla. And it was obviously it wasn't point and click because we didn't have a mouse or something, but it was like a kind of text parsed adventure game, and it was on the ZX Spectrum, and it was, look it up. It's by today's standards, the graphics are poor, but at the time it was absolutely, revolutionary. And I look back at the graphics now, and I still remember looking at the dragons and looking at the Viking warriors in it and the castles, and I remember seeing them how my imagination was supposed to see them. I remember them looking fantastic, and now I look at it and go, but it's only like 3 or 4 black squares moving across the screen. And how did I think that looked good? But at the time, it was, you know, I was kind of 4 years old, and it was incredible. Yeah, loved that game. Never completed it at all. I think I managed to get 1 item, and then I always got killed by somebody. But I absolutely loved it. It used to take about 45 minutes just to boot it up on the computer, and then it would crash, and you'd have to, because it was on a cassette. Precious memories.
Yeah, times have changed a lot, but
they have. Games still crash.
It was also probably that you were used to games looking like that because there wasn't better looking games. So maybe that's why it looked good when you had it back then, and then if you look at it now, it would be like, why did I think that looks good? Because now you're spoiled with.
I know, it's like when you watch the first like Jurassic Park film. I remember at the time just thinking, good God, it's like it's real. And now you kind of watch the first Jurassic Park film and you go, oh, blimey, by today's standards, it just your expectations are so high, you're just not convinced anymore. It's a shame in a way.
Yeah, now it's like, hey, there's a plastic dinosaur.
I know. It's like, oh, bless. At the time, I was utterly convinced.
Yeah, that's there was a lot of changes indeed. Now you have way more advanced stuff. Now the dinosaurs actually almost look like they could walk into your living room and eat you.
I know. I think that's why I love pixel art, because everyone's expectations are quite low. You don't, no one's going to go look at my pixel art and go, well, that doesn't look real, because it's so obviously not real that you can get away with doing something that just looks nothing like it's supposed to, because people are very forgiving of it because it's made up of 12 squares rather than a huge 4K high resolution 3D model.
Yeah, and with 3D models you are also looking at needing a higher budget, more time, probably more people, because otherwise you will probably release like in 2030.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge teams involved in some of the. Although I mean, there was some incredible 3D adventure games come out. There's one called Capia, which is created by a friend of mine on Twitter, Anna, and her husband. They should check that out as well, because it's absolutely incredible looking game.
And that's know Anna. I have her on Skype somewhere.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I mean, she's just the loveliest person as well. She's so supportive and so lovely, and the game just looks stunning.
Yeah, she is a great person indeed. I haven't talked to her in a while, but I know her game, and yeah, she's a really nice person to talk to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have any questions anymore. Do you have other things you want to say?
I'm gonna go and have some lunch. I've finished my tea, so it's time for me to go and have a sandwich. And no, I don't think I've got any more. I think I've probably talked for far too long as it is.
Nah, it's not too bad. It's not the longest interview I have done, but it's also not the shortest. Might be the second longest.
So at least I made some notes this time. Usually when people chat to me, I ain't no notes at all, and then I just end up waffling about utter rubbish for 2 or 3 hours, and then I feel really sorry for them that they have to edit it afterwards.
Oh, I don't edit it. I want the people to see everything of it.
Oh, brilliant! please edit some of it. I'm sure there's some stuff that's unnecessary. Oh, dear.
Well, most is about your game or video games in general, so it's all fine.
Jolly good. Yes, we didn't digress too far. That's okay.
Yeah, we just talked about more games than only your game. So it's all good. But yeah, cool. That's it for the interview then.
Brilliant. Well, it's been lovely to speak to you. Thank you for having me on.